The Harrington estate shimmered against the lake like a fortress of glass and steel, the kind of place that seemed untouchable, removed from the rest of the world. The sunlight caught its mirrored walls and threw back a glare so sharp it was almost blinding. Inside, the air was cool and heavy with polish, every marble tile reflecting the chandeliers above. Staff moved like clockwork, their steps measured, their voices hushed, as if the very walls might scold them for speaking out of turn. At the center of this ordered world was Mr. Grayson, the head butler. His presence carried more weight than most kings. With his pressed suit and his pinched face, he ruled the estate with rules no one dared question. The staff said he knew every tick of the clock, every misplaced crumb, and every careless whisper. It was into this world that Emily Carter stepped, her plain canvas bag slung over one shoulder and her worn sneakers squeaking faintly against the polished floors. She looked like she had walked straight out of another life, one made of bus rides and thrift stores, not marble foyers and crystal chandeliers. She clutched the strap of her bag as Mr. Grayson thrust a cleaning schedule into her hands, without so much as a glance at her face. Floors, windows, linens. That's your place. The young lady is not your concern. His voice was clipped, final, the words falling like a gavel. Before she could respond, he turned sharply on his heel and left her standing alone in the cavernous foyer. A group of maids passed by, their aprons spotless, their smiles sharp as glass. One with tight blonde curls leaned in close to her companion and muttered just loud enough for Emily to hear. Another one. Won't last a week, they smirked as they brushed past, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and judgment. Emily's jaw tightened, but her eyes remained steady. She had walked into rooms like this before, rooms that decided who you were before you opened your mouth. She pushed her cleaning cart forward, the squeak of the wheels filling the silence, and moved toward the stairs with the kind of calm that rattled those who wanted to see her break. In the staff dining room, the whispers continued. Cheryl, a maid with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes, leaned toward a younger girl and said, "Did you see her shoes? Looked like she came straight from a bus stop." Laughter rippled around the table, bouncing off the walls. Emily set her fork down gently, her eyes fixed on her plate. She didn't offend herself, didn't meet their eyes. But something in the deliberate calm of her movements made the laughter stumble and falter. She had no armor, but dignity, and that was enough. Later, as Emily pushed her cart through the west wing, a quiet chill settled over her. The air was different there, hushed, as though the walls themselves held their breath. She paused when she caught sight of a room where the door stood slightly ajar. A small figure sat inside, framed by the afternoon light that spilled through tall windows. Clara Harrington, the billionaire's only daughter, 7 years old, her body bound to a wheelchair, her eyes fixed on nothing and everything all at once. Emily froze, her hand stilling on the cart's handle. There was a silence about the child, not just the silence of a room, but the silence of a life. Lonely, heavy. For a moment, Clara's gaze flicked up and caught hers. A flash of connection, quick as lightning, but strong enough to leave Emily breathless. She should have looked away, should have remembered Mr. Grayson's words, but she couldn't. Something in Clara's eyes tugged at her, something she recognized. Her fingers moved absently to the pocket of her sweater, brushing over the worn edges of a faded photograph. A girl no older than Clara, captured mid-cartwheel, her smile wide, her body caught in the thrill of flight. Her sister, gone now, but never forgotten. Emily's throat tightened as she tucked the photo deeper, as though hiding it could keep the ache at bay. The car squeaked softly as she forced herself to move on, but her heart stayed behind in that room, with a child who had never taken a step and the ghost of a sister who never got the chance. Somewhere deep in the glass and marble fortress, a fragile thread had been tied between them, unseen, unspoken, but unbreakable. And Emily knew, even then, that she was already walking a dangerous line. The second morning dawned pale over the lake, its silver water mirroring the house that stood like an untouchable palace. Inside, the staff bustled through their routine, their chatter a mix of gossip and clipped instructions. Emily Carter carried her cleaning cart through the east wing, her sneakers squeaking against the marble. The weight of stairs followed her, some curious, others sharp as knives. Every time she lifted her head, she found a maid smirk or the gardener Tim sly grin waiting for her, as though the entire estate held its breath for her first mistake. Dot in the staff dining hall. The whispers were louder than yesterday. Cheryl, with her perfect curls and sharpened tongue, made sure of it. "She doesn't even know how this place runs," she declared to the table, tossing her hair back with an air of superiority. "I give it 3 days before Mr. Grayson has her packing." The younger maids giggled, their laughter low and mean. Emily said nothing. She lifted her cup of coffee, her hands steady, her eyes fixed on the steam rising like a veil between her and their ridicule. But her silence unsettled them. It wasn't weakness. It was something else. Something that made their laughter waver. That afternoon, while the staff scurried in and out of rooms polishing silver and dusting chandeliers, Emily found herself near the West Wing again. She wasn't supposed to linger there, but the pull was too strong. She pushed her cart slowly, letting the squeak of its wheels mask her racing heartbeat. At the end of the hall, a door cracked open just enough to reveal Clara Harrington. The girl was in her wheelchair, a doll resting limply on her lap, her pale hand stroking its faded dress as though trying to remember how it felt to care for something. Emily's chest tightened. She shouldn't interfere. The rules had been clear. Yet Clara's eyes lifted, catching her once again, and the same quiet plea glimmered there. A plea that no one else in the house seemed to see. Emily swallowed hard and, after a careful glance down the hall, stepped closer. "Do you like her dress?" Emily whispered, her voice soft as if speaking to the doll itself. Clara's lips twitched, almost a smile. She didn't answer, but she tilted the doll forward slightly, as though presenting it. Emily bent down, her fingers brushing the doll's sleeve. "When I was little, my sister had one just like this," she said. Her words carried a shadow, a memory she usually kept buried. Clara's eyes flickered with curiosity. Asterisk footsteps echoed in the hall, and Emily snapped upright, her heart hammering. Mr. Grayson swept past with his clipboard tucked under his arm, his eyes scanning the walls like a hawk. Emily turned quickly to her cart, scrubbing the already spotless banister as though she had been there for that sole purpose. Grayson's sharp gaze lingered for a moment, then moved on. The sound of his polished shoes faded, but Emily's pulse still thundered in her ears. That evening, the tension sharpened. Marcus, the cook with the booming voice and spatula always in hand, cornered Emily near the kitchen door. "You think you're better than us?" he sneered, his words carrying to the staff who lingered nearby. "Walking around here quiet like you've got secrets. We've seen plenty like you. Always think you'll change something. Always end up thrown out." His words cut through the air like a blade, and the staff nodded, their eyes hungry for Emily's reaction. Emily stood still, her hands clasped on the handle of her cart. She didn't flinch, didn't defend herself. She only said, calm and clear, "I'm just here to do my job." Something in her voice silenced Marcus's laughter. His spatula dropped against the counter with a clang, the sound startling in the charged air. Emily's steady gaze lingered just long enough before she pushed her cart forward, leaving the silence behind her like a shadow. But later that night, when most of the house had quieted and only the lake's soft waves lapped against the shore outside, Emily sat on a narrow bed in her small attic room. From her pocket she pulled the faded photograph, her sister, caught mid-cartwheel, a look of fierce joy on her face. The edges of the photo were worn from years of touch, the ink fading like a memory slipping away. Emily's fingers trembled as she traced the outline of her sister's leg in motion. She closed her eyes, and in that moment, the laughter of the staff, the sneers, the sharp voice of Grayson, all of it melted away. What remained was the image of Clara in her wheelchair, her doll resting in her lap, and her eyes filled with a longing Emily recognized all too well. It was the same look her sister had worn in those last days when hope was slipping, when no one believed she could move again. Emily pressed the photo to her chest, a vow forming in the silence. She didn't need the approval of Cheryl, Marcus, or even Mr. Grayson. She hadn't come here to prove herself to them. She had come here for something else, though she hadn't known it until she saw Clara's eyes. Tomorrow, she decided, she would not walk past that door again. Tomorrow, she would step inside. The morning began with a gray sky over the lake. The clouds stretched thin like whispers of secrets not yet told. Inside the Harrington estate, the air was as polished as the floors, every sound echoing through its cavernous halls. Emily Carter pushed her cart down the long corridor of the West Wing, her hands steady, though her heart beat faster with each step. She had promised herself last night she would not walk past Clara's door again. Today, she would go inside. The door stood ajar, the faint smell of lavender drifting from within. Emily hesitated at the threshold, listening for footsteps, for Mr. Grayson's sharp voice or Cheryl's cruel laughter. But the hall was empty, only the muffled clink of silverware in the kitchen far below breaking the silence. Taking a breath, she nudged the door open. Clara Harrington sat in her wheelchair near the window, sunlight pooling around her like a fragile halo. The doll rested in her lap again, her small fingers brushing its worn fabric. She turned her head slowly at the sound of the door and met Emily's gaze. No words, no smile, just that quiet, searching look that had pulled Emily toward her from the start. "Good morning," Emily said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. She moved her cart inside and shut the door gently behind her. "I thought maybe you'd like some company," Clara blinked, her lips parting as if she wanted to answer, but no sound came. Emily stepped closer, crouching down so their eyes were level. "Would you like to play a little game?" she asked, her tone light, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. The girl's eyes flickered, a spark beneath the stillness. Emily pulled a small hand towel from her cart and folded it into the shape of a bunny. She set it on the floor in front of Clara's wheelchair. "See this bunny?" she said, smiling softly. "He wants to hop, but he can't hop unless someone helps him. Do you think you can try?" Clara tilted her head, curiosity sharpening her gaze. Emily leaned closer, pointing gently toward Clara's foot. "Just a little push. Doesn't matter how small. Just try." At first there was nothing. Clara's leg remained still, her face blank with effort. Emily's heart tightened, memories flooding back her sister, pale and weak, fighting for every movement while doctors shook their heads. She bit her lip, willing herself to stay calm. "It's all right," she murmured. "Even trying is enough." Then it happened. A tiny twitch. Clara's toes brushed against the towel bunny, nudging it the smallest inch across the polished floor. Emily's breath caught. It was barely movement at all, but to her it was everything. Clara blinked down at her foot, her eyes widening in surprise. For a moment the silence broke, replaced by the faintest laugh of fragile sound, but real. Like a bird testing its wings after a long winter, Emily felt tears prick her eyes. But she forced them back. She couldn't let Clara see sorrow, only strength. "You did that," she said, her voice glowing with pride. "You made the bunny hop." Clara looked at her father's doll, then at Emily and whispered. Her voice cracked and thin, but clear enough to shatter the quiet. "Tomorrow. Can we do it again?" The word struck Emily like lightning. This child, locked in silence, bound to her chair, was asking not for pity, not for help but for hope. Emily nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She reached for the photo in her pocket, her thumb brushing the fading ink of her sister's cartwheel, but she didn't take it out. Not yet. Some memories belonged only to her. The sound of footsteps thundered suddenly in the hall. Emily's body went rigid. She quickly tucked the towel bunny back onto her cart and stood, her heart racing. The door opened and Mr. Grayson entered, his eyes sweeping the room like knives. Clara immediately turned her head away, her expression blank once more, her silence returning like armor. Emily gripped the cart handle tightly, bowing her head as though she had only been dusting. Mr. Grayson's eyes narrowed, his suspicion sharp, but he said nothing. After a long, tense pause, he turned and left, the click of his shoes fading into the distance. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Clara's eyes returned to her, the faintest glimmer of mischief there now, as if they shared a secret, a dangerous secret. Emily straightened her back, her calm mask slipping over her features once more. She wheeled her cart out of the room, but her pulse still raced. The house was a fortress of rules, of order and silence, but she had just broken the first rule. And in that broken rule, she had found something no one else had managed in years: a spark. She knew the risk. If Mr. Grayson discovered the truth, she would be gone. But as she brushed her fingers over her pocket, over the photo of her sister mid-cartwheel, Emily also knew she couldn't stop. She wouldn't. Tomorrow, Clara had asked, and tomorrow, Emily would return. Asterisk, the fourth day at the Harrington estate began with a strange hush, as though the house itself knew something was about to shift. The lake outside was calm, its surface unbroken, but inside the walls of glass and marble, the air was thick with tension. Emily Carter pushed her cart toward the west wing, her steps slower than usual, her mind alive with the memory of Clara's faint laugh the day before. That sound had been so delicate, so unexpected, that Emily had hardly slept. She kept replaying it in her head, holding onto it like a candle in a dark room. When she reached Clara's door, she paused, listening again for the echo of footsteps, for the steady rhythm of Mr. Grayson's patrol. Silence. She slipped inside, shutting the door softly behind her. Clara was waiting near the window, her doll in her lap, her face pale, but expectant. She didn't speak, but her eyes met Emily's, alive with a kind of anticipation that hadn't been there before. "Ready for our game?" Emily whispered, kneeling beside her. This time she placed the towel bunny on the ground a little farther away, testing Clara's determination. Clara's small hands gripped the armrest of her chair, her brow furrowed with focus. Her leg trembled faintly. Emily leaned in close, her voice steady and encouraging. "Don't think about how far. Just think about trying. Even the smallest try is a victory." Clara exhaled, her foot twitching once, then again. The movement jerky but real. The bunny shifted across the floor, a tiny hop forward. Clara gasped. Emily's chest swelled, pride and sorrow mingling until it hurt. "You're stronger than you think," she said softly, almost to herself. But then came the sound that turned her blood to ice. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, drawing nearer. Emily's heart seized. She reached to grab the towel, to hide the evidence, but it was too late. The door swung open. Maxwell Harrington stood there. He was taller than Emily had imagined up close, his presence commanding the room like a storm cloud. His tailored suit seemed almost too sharp for such a moment, his face carved from stone. For a heartbeat, the world froze. His eyes swept the room, landing first on Emily, then on Clara, then on the towel bunny lying a few inches away. Clara's foot still trembled faintly, betraying the effort she had just made. Emily rose to her feet slowly, her pulse thundering. She expected his anger, his dismissal, the cold authority of a billionaire who had no patience for staff who broke rules. But Maxwell didn't speak. His gaze had locked on Clara. Clara lifted her chin, her voice barely above a whisper, but strong enough to break the silence. "Daddy, I made the bunny hop." Emily's breath caught. It was the first time she had ever heard the girl speak with such directness, such raw pride. Maxwell's expression flickered, the ice in his eyes cracking for a moment as though he had seen something impossible. He stepped forward, his shadow falling over them both. "Clara," he said, his voice low, almost disbelieving. "You moved your leg." Clara nodded, her small face glowing. "Emily taught me." The name hung in the air like a forbidden word. Emily braced herself. Mr. Grayson's warnings rang in her ears. She had broken the rule. She had interfered. Surely now she would be cast out. But Maxwell did not shout. He did not call for Grayson or the guards. Instead, he sank slowly to one knee in front of his daughter, his large hand trembling as he reached out, hovering just above her foot. He didn't touch her, as though afraid the moment might vanish if he did. "Show me," he whispered. Emily's throat tightened. Clara pressed her lips together, concentrating. Her leg twitched again, the movement slight, imperfect, but undeniable. Maxwell's eyes widened, his composure faltering. For a man who ruled boardrooms, who bent entire industries to his will, it was the smallest motion of a child's foot that shattered him. He covered his mouth with his hand, the breath leaving him in a sound that was dangerously close to a sob. Behind him, a voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Mr. Grayson, sir." "She is overstepping her duties." His words were cold, rehearsed, meant to restore order. "The maid." "Enough." Maxwell's voice was sharp, silencing the butler instantly. He did not turn to look at him. His eyes remained on Clara, who was smiling for the first time in years. Emily stood frozen, uncertain whether she had been saved or only granted a temporary reprieve. Clara's small voice broke the silence again. "Can we play again tomorrow, Daddy? With Emily?" Maxwell inhaled deeply, his hand trembling as he rested it gently over Clara's. He finally looked at Emily, his eyes unreadable, caught between suspicion, disbelief, and something else, something fragile. "Tomorrow," he said slowly, the word heavy with meaning. "We will see." Then he stood, his power returning like a cloak over his shoulders, and strode from the room. Mr. Grayson followed, his lips pressed thin, his fury barely contained. Emily exhaled shakily. Clara looked at her, her smile faint but real. In that fragile smile, Emily saw both promise and danger. She had not only been caught, she had been witnessed, and now everything had changed. The estate was different after that afternoon. The silence in its marble halls carried a charge, like air before a storm. Whispers began to follow Emily everywhere she went, curling like smoke around corners and echoing in the servants' wing. It wasn't just quiet mockery anymore, it was sharper, venom wrapped in polite tones. She could feel their eyes on her when she passed, feel the contempt in the way they moved out of her way to slowly, daring her to brush against them. Cheryl, always the first to strike, became bolder. At breakfast in the staff dining room, she leaned across the table, her voice pitched just high enough for everyone to hear. Strange, isn't it? The new maid gets cozy with the young lady, and suddenly the master spends his afternoons lingering in the west wing. Almost looks like she's found her way into his good graces. A ripple of laughter spread across the table, bitter and poisonous. Marcus, with his spatula in hand like a weapon, added, "Careful, Emily. You might just trick him into thinking you're a miracle worker, until he sees you for what you really are." Emily sat quietly at the far end of the table, her tray untouched. She didn't answer. She had learned that silence could wound sharper than words, but her calm only stoked their anger. They wanted her to break, to lash out and confirm what they already believed, that she didn't belong here. Instead, she lifted her coffee and took a slow sip, her face composed, though her stomach twisted with unease. In the shadows of the kitchen doorway, Tim, the young gardener with restless ambition, watched her. His smile was thin, his eyes calculating. Unlike the others, he didn't laugh. He was waiting, biding his time. Upstairs, Maxwell Harrington wrestled with something far heavier. In his study, the curtains drawn, he replayed the image over and over in his mind, Clara's trembling leg twitching, the impossible sight of his daughter's movement after years of stillness. He poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. For years he had emptied his fortune into specialists, therapists, and cutting-edge clinics. All of them had failed him. Yet a maid with no credentials had coaxed more from his daughter in 3 days than the best money could buy. It unsettled him, shook him. And beneath that shaking was a dangerous flicker of hope he had long ago buried. Hope was a fragile thing, and he had learned not to trust it. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Clara smile, the rarest thing in the world. That evening, as Emily quietly folded linens in the laundry room, the air shifted. Cheryl entered, her heels clicking sharply against the tile, followed by 2 other maids. They circled her like vultures. "Think you're clever?" Cheryl hissed, her fake sweetness gone. "Think you can just walk in here, play games with the child, and make us all look like fools?" Emily kept folding, her movements calm, though her pulse quickened. "I'm just doing my job," she said, her voice steady. "Your job," Cheryl snapped, "is to clean, not to play doctor. If you really cared about that child, you leave before you hurt her." The others murmured in agreement, their eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. But before Emily could respond, Clara's small voice floated into the room from the hall. "She doesn't hurt me." Every head turned. Clara sat in her wheelchair at the doorway, her doll tucked against her chest, her eyes bright with something fierce. "Emily makes me happy." The room froze. For Clara to speak at all, let alone in front of staff, was unheard of. Cheryl's mouth opened and closed, her confidence faltering. Emily's heart swelled, but she kept her composure, moving to gently will Clara away. As she did, she caught Cheryl's eyes, and for the first time, it was Cheryl who looked away. Later that night, Maxwell stood at the window of his study, staring out at the lake. When Emily was summoned, she entered quietly, her hands clasped in front of her, braced for dismissal. He turned slowly, his face unreadable. "How did you do it?" His voice was low, roughened by disbelief. Emily swallowed, her throat tight. "I didn't do anything, sir." Clara did. She just needed someone to believe she could. The words struck him like a blow. For years he had been told to stop hoping, told to accept Clara's fate. But here stood a maid, a woman with nothing, telling him his daughter only needed faith. He looked at her differently then, searching her face for trickery, but finding only quiet conviction. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why risk yourself? You know Grayson would have you thrown out if he could." Emily hesitated, then pulled the photograph from her pocket. She held it out, her fingers trembling slightly. It was her sister, frozen mid-cartwheel, a ghost of what could have been. "Because I couldn't save her," she whispered. "But maybe I can help Clara." Maxwell took the photo, his hand brushing hers. His gaze lingered on the faded image, and something shifted in his eyes, a crack in the armor he had worn for years. Neither of them spoke again for a long moment. The silence between them was heavy, charged with something dangerous and unspoken. Outside the study, hidden in the shadows, Tim watched. His eyes narrowed, his mind already spinning. A maid who could bend the will of the master. That was a threat, and threats had to be dealt with. The lake was restless that morning, ripples chasing each other across its surface as though the water itself sensed the tension that had settled over the Harrington estate. Inside, the house seemed quieter than usual, though the silence was deceptive. Beneath it, The staff seethed. Cheryl had retreated into whispers, Marcus into muttering, but Tim, sharp-eyed, always lurking where he wasn't needed, had begun to gather the rest like a shadowy chorus. Their resentment no longer simmered in corners. It sharpened into a plan. Emily Carter felt the weight of it pressing against her with every step she took through the marble halls. She didn't need their words to know they despised her. She saw it in the narrowed eyes, the sudden hush when she entered the dining room. The way cleaning supplies mysteriously went missing from her cart. But she refused to falter. She kept her head high, her step steady, her silence stronger than their venom. Clara was her anchor. Each afternoon, Emily slipped into the West Wing where the air carried a fragile stillness. Behind closed doors, their secret games grew bolder. No longer was it only the towel bunny. Emily introduced balancing tricks, stacking blocks on Clara's knees, urging her to push them off with tiny movements. She transformed the girl's therapy into play, each twitch, each tremor of muscle disguised as fun. And every time Clara laughed, that rare, luminous laugh, Emily felt her own chest crack open with a bittersweet joy she hadn't felt in years. One evening, as the sun sank behind the glass walls, Emily placed Clara's small feet on the rug. She crouched in front of her, steadying the girl with both hands. "Just press down," Emily whispered. "Feel the floor. Let it hold you." Clara's brow furrowed, her lips pressed tight in determination. Slowly, painfully, her toes curled, her legs trembling as she pushed. The chair squeaked as her weight shifted forward. Emily's breath caught. For a fraction of a second, Clara bore weight on her own feet. Then she collapsed back into the chair, panting, her face flushed. But her eyes glowed with victory. I felt it," she gasped, her voice thin but fierce. Emily laughed, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. She brushed Clara's hair back, whispering, "You are stronger than anyone knows." Neither of them realized Maxwell Harrington had been standing in the doorway, silent as stone. He had watched every tremble, every falter, every impossible moment. For years he had hidden his hope beneath a shield of cynicism, but now the shield cracked. He stepped forward, his voice low, almost reverent. She stood, he whispered, as though testing the words against reality. Emily turned, startled, her hand still on Clara's shoulder. "Not fully," she said quickly, as if bracing for reprimand. "But she's trying. That's what matters." Maxwell's eyes burned with something unfamiliar, something dangerous, belief. He crouched before his daughter, his hand trembling as he cupped her cheek. "You did this," he told Clara, his voice breaking. "Not the doctors, not the clinics, you." Clara leaned into his hand, her smile so radiant it left him speechless, but the fragile moment did not go unnoticed. Later that night, while the master lingered in the West Wing, Tim gathered Cheryl, Marcus, and the others in the servants' quarters. "Do you see what's happening?" Tim hissed, his eyes flashing. "She's worming her way in. First the child, now the master. How long before she replaces all of us? How long before he trusts her more than his own blood staff?" Cheryl crossed her arms, bitterness etched in every line of her face. "She's making fools of us. The girl was ours to care for, and she did what we couldn't. That won't stand." Marcus slammed his spatula against the table. "Then we make sure she doesn't last another week." Tim leaned closer, his grin thin and sharp. "Not a week, not another day. We'll catch her in the act. And when we do, the master himself will cast her out." Their voices sank into whispers, weaving a net of malice around Emily's name. Upstairs, unaware of the plot coiling below, Emily tucked Clara into bed. She brushed the girl's hair from her forehead, humming a lullaby her sister once loved. Clara's eyes fluttered closed, her hand clinging to Emily's sleeve. "Don't go," she murmured. Emily bent and kissed her temple, her voice steady though her heart ached. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. But deep down, she knew promises were fragile things in a house built on rules and pride. The storm was gathering, and tomorrow, it would break. The storm broke the next day. The sky above the Harrington estate churned with clouds, the lake reflecting the bruised gray of the heavens. The house felt different, as though the walls themselves were tense, listening. Emily Carter carried her cart down the hallway, the familiar squeak of its wheels echoing like a warning. She could feel it in her bones. Something was about to happen. When she reached the West Wing, Clara was already waiting, her eyes brighter than usual. She gripped the armrest of her wheelchair, her small frame buzzing with restless energy. "Can we try again?" she whispered, almost breathless with excitement. Emily knelt before her, her heart warm and trembling. "Yes," she said softly. "We'll try together." She positioned Clara's feet on the rug, braced her shoulders, and whispered encouragement as the child pushed. Clara's legs trembled, her body straining. For a moment, she lifted herself just enough for her weight to leave the chair. Emily's chest filled with pride. "That's it, Clara. You're doing it." The door burst open. Cheryl, Tim, Marcus, and the other staff members stormed in, their faces twisted with triumph. "Caught you," Cheryl hissed, her voice sharp enough to slice the air. "Dangerous games with a child who can't walk. You'll kill her," Clara gasped, startled, and collapsed back into the chair. Emily's arm steadied her, her own heart pounding. "You don't understand," Emily said, her voice shaking with restrained fury. "She's stronger than you think." But Tim cut her off, his voice raised for the whole house to hear. "She's manipulating the girl. She's tricking the master, making him believe miracles where there are none. It's all a lie, and we won't let you ruin this family." The shouting drew others. Mr. Grayson appeared in the doorway, his expression thunderous, and behind him came Maxwell Harrington himself, his presence filling the room like a storm rolling in. He took in the scene at a glance: Clara's flushed face, Emily crouched protectively beside her, the staff arrayed like accusers ready to strike. "What is this?" Maxwell's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of authority that silenced every tongue. Tim stepped forward, emboldened. "Sir, this maid is overstepping. She is putting your daughter in danger, making her believe she can do things she cannot. She's poisoning the house with false hope." Emily rose slowly to her feet, her hands still on Clara's shoulders. Her voice shook, but her eyes burned with conviction. "It isn't false. Clara has been trying. Every day she gets stronger. Yesterday she stood for a heartbeat. Today she pushed further. She's not broken. She's fighting. All she needed was someone to believe in her." The staff sneered, but Maxwell didn't look at them. His eyes were locked on his daughter. "Clara," he said softly, almost pleading. "Is this true?" Clara's small voice trembled, but it was clear. "Daddy, I want to try. Emily helps me. She doesn't hurt me. She makes me brave." For a moment, Tom stood still. Then Maxwell turned, his gaze sweeping the staff like a blade. "Enough." His voice thundered now, filled with fire. "You call yourselves loyal, yet you mock a woman who has given my daughter something none of you ever could. She has given her hope." The room quaked with silence. Cheryl's smirk died on her lips. Marcus dropped his spatula-turned weapon, and even Tim's grin faltered. Maxwell stepped forward, his hand firm on Clara's shoulder. "Show them," he whispered. Emily knelt beside Clara, her eyes meeting the girls. "It's all right. Just one step. Not for them. Not even for me. For you." The child's lips pressed together, her determination fierce. Slowly, trembling, she gripped Emily's hands and pushed. Her feet pressed against the rug, her legs quaking. With a cry of effort, Clara lifted herself from the chair. Gasps filled the room. She wobbled, knees shaking, but she didn't fall. Emily steadied her, and then, impossibly, breathtakingly, Clara moved one foot forward. A single, trembling step. The room erupted with shocked silence, the kind that falls when the impossible becomes undeniable. Maxwell's breath caught, his hand flying to his mouth as tears filled his eyes. He had not cried in years, but now he sobbed openly. Not as a billionaire, not as a man of power, but as a father watching his daughter rise from the prison she had been bound in. Clara took another small step, collapsing into Emily's arms with laughter bubbling through her tears. "I did it, Daddy," she whispered, her voice shining. Maxwell fell to his knees before her, pulling both Clara and Emily into his embrace. "You did more than that," he choked out. "You did the impossible." Behind them, the staff stood frozen, their rebellion shattered. The sneers, the whispers, the venom, all of it silenced by the sight of a child who had taken her first step in years. Not because of their rules, not because of their wealth, but because of the maid they despised. And in that moment, the house of glass and marble no longer belonged to them. It belonged to Clara, who had walked, and to Emily, who had made her believe she could.